been a lot of conversation recently about disagreement, and especially in the United States, the First Amendment rights to free speech. Somehow, over the last couple of years, this whole concept of disagreement has become convoluted. Too many people are wrapping up the thought of disagreement with the feeling of hatred, and they've been using those things interchangeably. And I get it. I understand that when somebody disagrees with you, sometimes you can feel offense and sometimes you can take it personally, and that stirs up emotion in you. But it's important to understand that those two things are separate. A disagreement is more logical. Hatred is a feeling, right? It's of the heart versus the head. And these are two totally different things. But as you step back and look at especially the mainstream media and the conversations that are taking place, these two things are being confused all the time. And it really is interesting to think about the fact that maybe we just don't know how to disagree effectively. So let's talk about that. Here are 5 secrets for how to disagree with somebody, but still keep them as your friend. First and foremost, it's about keeping the relationship and not getting the result. At the end of a conversation or a disagreement with somebody, you want to be able to maintain that relationship. Heck, or even start a new relationship if it's with a stranger. Remember, disagreement is more about logic than it is about feeling. And the more that you can separate those two things out, the better off you're going to be. But if you go into a conversation or a disagreement with somebody and you just want to be right, chances are pretty good you're going to miss the logic. You're not going to learn their perspective, and you're sure going to offend them. Keeping the relationship primary means that maybe you have to compromise a little bit. And if both sides are doing it, well, then you can end up in a stronger place in your relationship without stepping all over each other and creating a rift in that relationship. Ultimately, it's about understanding. And what's going to get you there? Number 2, curiosity. Go into that conversation, any conversation with regard to disagreeing with somebody, with the intent to understand where they're coming from. Be curious. In The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Dr. Stephen Covey talks about, I think it's rule number 4 or habit number 4, where he says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. It's important to go in and understand where that other person is coming from, because you may learn something from that perspective, and it will also help you with your perspective in portraying your perspective, knowing where they are. You can reframe the way that you are seeing the world and that you're seeing the approach and be able to present it to them in a way that they may be able to understand. Seeking to understand and being curious allows you to work together, again, toward number 1, that relationship. Number 3, own your bias. Everybody has biases, and you have to understand that going into a conversation, you're bringing those biases with you. I do it all the time, right? Any conversation that we're going into, we carry those biases with us. It's important to recognize that we have them, even though we may not be able to see them in the moment. But understand that in the conversation that you're having, the person on the other side may not have those same biases, or they may have different biases, which flavor the conversation. It's important to understand those pieces. And again, go back to understanding where they're coming from and keeping that relationship as the primary focus. Now we'll get into some real nuts and bolts here with how to make these disagreement arguments in conversations much more effective. And number 4, I cannot emphasize this enough. Separate who a person is from what they do or what they believe. I'll say that one again. Separate who a person is in your mind from what they do and what they believe. Just like disagreement and hatred are sometimes confused. We sometimes will confuse who a person is with what they do, or more importantly, what they don't do. And too often that results in name calling or assigning a group to somebody. You see it at home between spouses all the time, right? Oh, you're lazy. You didn't take out the trash, or you didn't do this, you didn't do that, right? You start applying those labels and those names to somebody, and maybe they start to hold on to it. And maybe it starts to show itself in other areas of their life. You've got to be really careful here to not confuse those two. What somebody does or what they don't do does not make them who they are. Again, it goes back to number one when you look at the relationship, right? If you want the relationship to be the primary focus, you have to separate these two pieces out. Because you can't have a positive relationship with somebody if you're putting labels on them. If you're calling them lazy, if you're calling them stupid, if all of those things, even if you're not even saying it out loud, if you're thinking it in your mind. And I'll tell you where this is really rampant right now is you see it in the media, especially. It's name calling the left and the right, right? Because of beliefs, because of how they look at the world or how they interpret laws, right? Those types of things. We're seeing an unprecedented number of times where people are called fascists or white supremacists because they believe X, Y, and Z, or because they believe in less gun control. Or if you believe in gun control, there's a whole set of views that and names that go on you there too. Like, guys, this is ridiculous. What you believe does not make you who you are. And who you are is somebody that is unique, that is special, that probably has beliefs and understandings on both sides of the aisle when it comes to politics, or even in the office. You need that diversity of opinion and of approach in order to move in the right directions. So separate out who from what. And last, number 5, is avoid absolutes in the conversation. Whenever somebody is getting frustrated and emotion is starting to come into play, you almost will always hear that? Will almost always, never. All of these absolutes start to come into play. You never take out the trash. You never get these reports to me on time. That opens you up for flaws in logic. Well, that's not true because 2 weeks ago I did. As a matter of fact, here it is. This is what I did. And here's that wasn't the actual point that you were making, right? The actual point that you were making was you're not living up to the expectations in this role, if we look at a professional setting, because there are many times where you have not delivered where you were supposed to. That's a much more defensible argument than it is to say you never produce the reports on time. The same thing goes at home as well. So let's recap. Number 1, the relationship is the primary focus. So make sure you focus on relationship over result. Number 2 is approach it with curiosity. Seek to understand where that other person is coming from and not just to walk in there and hope that you are understood. Number 3, we all have biases that we enter these conversations with. Be aware of those. Understand that you are bringing those biases into the conversation, and so is the other person. And that's where curiosity can really come into play, is understanding what those biases are and maybe coming up with a better agreement. Number 4 is separate the who from the what. Who a person is does not mean that they believe certain things, and just because they believe or do certain things does not make somebody a label. Let's separate those pieces out. And then number 5 is avoid absolutes. Absolutes are not usually true. They can open up flaws in your logic, and frankly, they avoid the original point that you're trying to make most of the time anyway. It's not always or never. It's that in certain situations, expectations weren't met. That's a much more productive conversation to have. So, with all of the conversation taking place around disagreement and the confusion, and people, frankly, not knowing how to disagree, I hope that these 5 tips have helped you to understand and given you something that you can take back with you to help you in a next conversation that you're going to have an argument, a lighthearted disagreement, joking with your friends, whatever it happens to be. Keep these 5 simple tips in mind. Take care.